We are fast forwarding through the book. We are heading to chapter 20. The rest of the year, we'll be talking about the human body and different systems that make it up. The general overview is that we'll be talking about maybe maybe two systems per week. That's my goal, actually. And hopefully we'll be able to get through most of the organ systems by the end of May. So just a quick overview about the organization of the human body and what anatomy and physiology is, because that's kind of what we're jumping into. We're jumping into anatomy and physiology, and just so you know, everything we talk about will be very surfacey. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty. We'll learn some new terms, we'll learn new parts, we'll learn new functions of those parts, but it's going to be very limited. If you want to learn more, which I hope you'll be interested enough to do, then anatomy and physiology would be, human anatomy and physiology would be a good course for you to take in the future, because that would be a whole year's worth of human anatomy and physiology. And so you could spend a lot more time on each of these different organ systems and talking about them in depth. But just a quick look at some of the terms. Human anatomy, you've heard me just use anatomy and physiology. Well, what does that mean? Anatomy is the actual physical makeup and structure. So for example, your arm, your lower arm has like two bones, and then it has lots of muscles and blood vessels and lots of different tissues surrounding it. And then there's a joint, your elbow, which then connects to another bigger arm called, or bigger bone called the humerus. And that's the big bone where your bicep is, which is a muscle in your upper arm. And that's called the humerus. And that's the anatomy, very general anatomy of your arm. So the structures that make something up, that's the anatomy. The physiology is the process of how it all works. So how does my arm work so that I can lift things, or I can push things? Or how does it work in conjunction with my shoulder and my back, and then my trunk, and then my legs? How does it all work together to make me a walking, talking, resourceful human being? That's the physiology part. How does it happen? How does it work? A general review on how our body is organized. Cells, the basic unit of life, are the smallest part, and we have trillions of them that make up our body. Those groups of cells work together to form tissues, and then those groups of tissues work together to form organs, which then form organ systems, and then we get organisms in the case of us, people, humans. Within a human, there are 4 types of tissues. Remember, those are groups of cells that work together. So you have epithelial tissue, which serves as for protection, absorption, and secretion. Then you have connective tissue, which connects, as the name says, connects body parts, helps support, helps to cushion, like between joints, so your knees aren't taking abuse every time you walk. And then it works to fill in space around tissues and organs, so things aren't always bumping into each other in harsh ways as you walk and talk and you live your life. Muscle tissue, tissues that are made up of different cells that can contract and produce movement. Some of those movements are voluntary. So when you talk, that's a voluntary movement. When you write, that's a voluntary movement. Walking, running, etc. Other things that are not voluntary, meaning you don't tell yourself to breathe. So as your diaphragm works, that would be muscle tissue, but it's not, you're not thinking about it. Same thing likewise with your heart. You're not telling your heart to beat. You don't have to, thankfully, but that's involuntary muscle tissue. Then there's nervous tissue, which helps you to respond to a stimuli and react accordingly. So they, in your fingers, if you touch something hot, you immediately transmit a signal to your brain, and then your brain says, don't touch that, move. So that's your nervous tissue. Then there are 11 organ systems. You will not have to list these. That's not important to me, because as we go through them, you're going to learn their names anyway. So we're going to start, chapter 20 involves the integumentary system. It's a big fancy word, meaning basically skin. And then the lymphatic system, another kind of fancy word, which means your immune system. And then we'll hopefully be able to get at least a little bit through the rest of the 9, although it's going to be a tight squeeze. So skeletal, muscular, respiratory, and then to finish out the list, you have your circulatory system, digestive, urinary system, nervous system, endocrine system, and your reproductive system. So today we will talk about the integumentary system, and we'll look at a diagram over the next few slides, and we'll point out different parts of the anatomy. And then we will talk a little bit about the physiology of those parts. So your main 2 layers of skin, even though we're going to talk about 3 layers here, the top 2 layers, and then you're going to have your subcutaneous layer down below, which is kind of like the cushion of the skin. So the very top layer is the epidermis, and it's the flesh-colored top, which is what you see when you look at your skin. You're seeing the top of the epidermis, and then a little bit of this pink down in here. And it is made solely of epithelial tissue, and it's replaced every 4 weeks. So you are going to be, as you look at your skin in 4 weeks, it's going to be new skin. It's going to look the same basically, but it's going to be new skin. And so once a month you're getting new skin, which is why as you get out of the shower and you dry off, or you especially in the winter, we get what feels like drier skin. It's not that we're producing more skin, it's just that the drier the air, because of the heating systems that we use in the winter, it kind of takes the moisture out of the air, and it makes us feel drier because we're not producing as much oil on the surface. Anyway, long story short, you see the dry skin more easily, and that's because it's getting replaced every 4 weeks. But that's good for a couple of reasons. The biggest reason is it helps us to repair scrapes and bumps quite quickly. So if you have a little bit of a scrape on your knee, then it doesn't stay there forever. That's because your skin cells are being replaced every 4 weeks. So it's a very quick healing process for most scrapes and cuts. But deeper down, this really thick layer here is their dermis, and that has all 4 types of tissue: connective, muscular, epithelial, and nervous. And we're going to talk about what all these things are. And then this very bottom layer is connective tissue, and that's the subcutaneous layer, and that's fat. Look, fatty tissue. All of this yellow here is fatty tissue, and then you have your veins and arteries going through there. So let's talk about the specific anatomy and some of the physiology of your skin. So you've heard this word before, melanin. Well, melanin is a pigment, and it's in everyone's skin. It is genetic, how much you have. So I have a certain amount of melanin in my skin. My children have a certain amount of melanin in their skin, and it's not going to be quite the same, which is why no one's skin color is actually identical. So there are a lot of white-skinned people that look very similar to me, but if we were to all hold our arms up and compare our skin colors, they would all be slightly different. That's because we all have slightly different levels of melanin in our skin. So that's the brown pigment that gives your skin color its color. And obviously, across different races and ethnicities, those populations in general have more, or depending, less melanin than other races and ethnicities. But even within those races and ethnicities, no one has the exact same skin color. So yes, groups of people have more melanin than other groups of people, or less, but everybody across the entire world's population, it's a genetic condition, how much melanin you have in your skin. So there are different amounts of melanin for every person, but obviously certain groups have more or less than others. So things to keep in mind: within the skin, you have receptor cells, which help you feel pressure. So if something's pushing against you, you're going to feel that. They're going to help you feel texture. Is it smooth? Is it rough? Hard? Soft? And it'll help you know about temperature. So is it hot? Should I move my fingers? Yes, you should. Don't get burned. Those kinds of the receptor cells. And you have hair, which is everywhere on your body except 2 places: the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet. There are a couple of, the hair is made up of kind of 2 broad parts. You have the shaft, which comes through the epidermis. That's the hair that you see, but there's a whole lot of hair that you don't see. And that comes through the through the epidermis into the dermis, and then it starts at the hair follicle, which is very deep in the dermis. And you kind of have types of openings, and the types of openings depend or help dictate which the kind of opening you have is a genetic determination. But if you have a rounder opening in your hair follicle, you're going to have straight hair. If you have a more elliptical shape, you're going to have curlier hair. Also, deep here, so we've got these sweat glands. Well, they produce sweat. So when you get hot, you get the sweat gets released from the sweat gland all the way up into through the dermis and up to the epidermis, which helps you cool through evaporative cooling. You have sebaceous glands, sometimes called oil glands, but those are found also in the dermis, but not quite so deep. Look, they're right here at the top. And those release something called sebum, which is a collection of oils, fats, and cellular waste. And it also, they help to keep that oil coming out, keeps stuff from coming in, like bacteria and viruses. But at your all's age, in your teen years, you actually produce more sebum than any other stage in your life. And those glands can become inflamed and build up with and inflammation triggers the production of white blood cells and more sebum. And that's why you get acne. And then also within this integumentary layer, you have fingernails and toenails. Now, fingernails do a great job of protecting, and your toenails too, that sensitive layer of skin underneath the toenails. They're an important function of protection. And they're made up of dead skin cells, they're made up of dead cells and are filled with a protein called keratin. And that forms a protective layer protecting those nail beds. And your fingernails, if you look at your fingernail right now and look at the very edge next to the cuticle in the far back, that will be with you for 6 months. Okay. So your fingernails gets completely replaced every 6 months. Your toenails, same idea. If you go all the way back to the beginning, like where your toe is at that cuticle line, that toenail at the very tip, the very edge of that nearest your skin, the back layer at the back of your toe towards the skin, and then the nail starting at that edge, that part of your toenail will be with you for about a year, and it keeps getting pushed forward and pushed forward and pushed forward until you have to hygiene and clip that nail. Okay, so that your nail gets replaced, your toenail replaced every year, your fingernails every 6 months. So what's talking more about the function of the integumentary system? It protects your body from antigens. Typically we think of antigens as being bacteria and viruses, but could also be various other parasites, protozoans, but it's your first line of defense, it's that barrier. Because remember, when you get sick, it's not because things are going through your skin. You're not soaking up viruses and bacteria. Your skin can hold on to them for a little while, but it's not penetrating your skin. So what's happening is if you get sick because something has been on your skin and then you have ingested it or rubbed your eyes, you've eaten with your fingers and it's been on your hands, you've bitten your fingernails, something like that. So you're getting it through generally your eyes and your mouth are how you're getting these viruses. If you touch them, you're getting in not through your skin, but through your mouth or through your eyes. So that's why, you shouldn't put your hands in your mouth. You should try to avoid touching your face altogether. If we've learned anything from this virus, this COVID-19 virus, I hope it's that you just try not to touch your face. And then the other thing I hope you've learned is wash your hands frequently. Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. That won't help you with just COVID-19. It's just going to help you stay healthy in general. So protect from antigens. They don't enter your body through your skin. That's good. Number 2, they keep your body temperature under control. The insulation keeps you warm. That subcutaneous layer, that fatty layer helps keep you warm. And then the sweat glands release sweat. Evaporative cooling on the surface of your skin helps keep you cool. You also release toxins, cellular waste through the skin. And it tells you if something hurts, if something's hot, if something's too cold. That information gives you that feedback and says, stop doing that. Stop touching that. Don't hammer your finger anymore. That was a mistake. Don't do it again. And of course, because our body is a big system, like is multiple systems working together for one big system, your body, it's going to work with other systems, your circulatory system, blood vessels, your lymphatic system. There's lymph. I'm going to go back and show you that. Hang on just a second. Let me pull this up. We're going to talk about the lymphatic system tomorrow, but here is a lymph vessel, and we're going to talk about what lymph is tomorrow, but here it is. So just like you have blood vessels, you also have lymph vessels right there. And that's going to carry the fluid lymph through your body. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. But I just wanted to point it out that it's in there, and it's in the dermis of your skin mostly. All right. And then your kidneys and your urinary system work to release waste, right? Go to the bathroom, you release waste, but also out through your skin as well. And another big thing that's very important, you're going to be hearing about it a lot, you need to get outside, because the sun is a natural, the natural way to get vitamin D into your system. And that can absorb vitamin D through your skin, and that helps your skeletal system, because it helps you, if you have a good amount of vitamin D, then you can absorb calcium, and that helps your bones stay healthy and strong. And vitamin D is also, a healthy dose of vitamin D is also good for your immune system and helps you be able to fight off diseases. And we will stop there, and I will talk about the lymphatic system tomorrow.